Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something that you specifically wanted to explore, and it's this fear of abandonment
Yeah.
that many adults on the autism spectrum experience. And,
Yeah.
you sent in some really interesting articles and excerpts from websites,
Yeah,
and I have to say some of them were pretty eye-opening.
for sure.
I'm really eager to get our experts' take on all this.
I'm ready to dig in. This is such an important topic
Yeah.
because, this fear that we're talking about, it's not just
Hmm.
some random thing. It's really like deeply rooted in a
Yeah.
combination of factors.
Right.
So we really need to look at past experiences,
Hmm.
the social challenges that autistic individuals often face,
Yep.
and even those, early attachment patterns that we all develop that shape how we relate to others.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Okay.
Let's start with those past experiences.
Sure.
What kind of things might contribute to this feeling of,
Okay.
being terrified of being left behind?
Yeah. Well, imagine growing up in a world that doesn't quite understand
Yeah.
how you communicate or how you socialize.
Hmm.
You might experience rejection or isolation because of these misunderstandings.
Right.
Maybe your attempts to connect were met with confusion or even hostility.
Yeah.
And, those negative experiences, especially during those crucial developmental years,
Yep.
can really leave a lasting mark
Hmm.
and make it really hard to trust that relationships
Yeah.
will be safe and stable.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, go
It's like those
ahead.
early
Yeah.
experiences create this underlying anxiety, this feeling that connection is
Right.
fragile and can be easily broken.
For sure.
And it's even more intense when you factor in the ongoing social challenges
Right.
that many autistic adults face. They're talking about,
Absolutely.
struggling to decode those social cues,
Yes.
sensory overload in certain environments,
Yeah,
even just feeling like you're speaking a different language than everyone else.
exactly. And these ongoing challenges can actually feed into the fear of abandonment in a couple of ways.
Okay.
First, they can make it hard to form and maintain relationships.
Yeah.
Imagine constantly feeling like you're saying the wrong thing or missing social cues.
Right.
It's exhausting and can lead to a sense of isolation.
Hmm.
Second, these challenges can reinforce those negative beliefs
Yeah.
formed from past experiences.
Right.
If you're constantly struggling to connect,
Yeah.
it's easy to internalize the message that there's something wrong with you,
All right.
that you're not worthy of love and belonging.
It's almost like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The social challenges make it harder to connect,
Yes.
which reinforces the fear of abandonment,
Absolutely.
which can make those social interactions even more anxiety-provoking.
Yes.
It's a lot to deal with.
It really is. And on top of all of that, we have to consider attachment styles.
Yeah.
These are the patterns of relating to others that we all develop early in life,
Hmm.
largely based on our interactions with our primary caregivers. For someone who didn't have consistent responsive caregiving,
Yeah.
they might develop an insecure attachment style,
Okay.
which can make them more prone to anxiety and fear of rejection in adult relationships.
It's like this perfect storm.
Right.
Past hurts, ongoing social difficulties,
Yes.
and then this underlying anxiety about whether people will stick around.
Absolutely.
No wonder this fear can feel so overwhelming for some people.
Right. And one of the articles you sent in actually talked about how
Yep.
some autistic individuals might even be more sensitive to changes in routine or in those relationship dynamics.
Interesting.
And this heightened sensitivity, when
Yeah.
combined with an insecure attachment style,
Yeah.
can make the fear of abandonment even more intense.
That's interesting. It's like their nervous systems are wired to be more attuned to potential threats
Exactly.
to their sense of safety and security.
Yeah.
So if someone is already feeling anxious about a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
even a small change in plans could trigger a huge wave of fear.
Exactly. And that can lead to some pretty challenging behavioral patterns.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How does this fear actually play out
Yeah.
in someone's life? What are the real world consequences? I know that's what our
Mhm.
listeners are really keen to understand.
Right. Well, one common pattern is avoiding intimacy altogether. It's that classic push-pull dynamic
Yeah.
where someone craves connection but then pushes people away
Right.
because the fear of getting hurt is just too intense.
It's like they're stuck in this self-protective mode,
Yeah.
thinking, if I don't let anyone get close, then I can't be abandoned.
Right.
But of course, that just leads to more loneliness and isolation,
Exactly.
which can make the fear even worse.
Right. And then there's the opposite pattern,
Okay.
where the fear manifests as clinginess or a constant need for reassurance.
Okay.
That feeling of needing constant validation from loved ones just to feel secure.
Right.
Like, tell me you love me or promise you'll never leave.
And I can see how that could be really tough on a relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
It puts so much pressure on the other person
Yeah.
to constantly prove their commitment.
Right.
And even when they do offer reassurance,
Mm-hmm.
it might not be enough to truly quell that deep-seated fear.
You hit the nail on the head. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket.
Yeah.
The reassurance provides temporary relief,
Okay.
but the fear keeps seeping back in.
Right.
And unfortunately, this constant need for reassurance can actually push people away,
Oh, wow.
creating the very abandonment that the person fears most.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it really highlights just how complex this issue is.
Yeah.
It's not just about being needy or clingy.
Right.
There's this deep-rooted fear driving those behaviors.
Exactly.
And in some cases, this fear might even lead to overreacting to perceived threats in a relationship.
Absolutely. Small disagreements or changes in plans
Yeah.
can suddenly become huge triggers because they tap into that primal fear of being abandoned.
Right.
Imagine how exhausting that must be, both for the person experiencing it and for their loved ones.
One of the articles you sent in talked about how
Yes.
some autistic individuals might be more sensitive to criticism
Right.
or perceived rejection,
Yeah,
even if it's not intended that way.
exactly.
And this sensitivity, combined with the fear of abandonment,
Yeah.
can create this
Okay.
constant feeling of being on edge, like walking on eggshells in relationships.
And that's such an important point.
Yeah.
It's not about being overly sensitive.
Right.
It's about recognizing that for some autistic individuals,
Mhm.
their nervous systems are wired to be more reactive to certain social cues.
Okay.
And when you layer on top of that the fear of being left behind,
Yeah.
it's no wonder that even small conflicts can feel like major threats.
So we're seeing how this fear can lead to all these really challenging patterns.
Yes.
Avoiding intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
seeking constant reassurance,
Yep.
overreacting to perceived threats.
Right.
It's a lot to manage.
Yep.
And I know our listeners are eager to hear about some strategies for coping with this.
Okay.
What can they actually do
Yeah.
to start breaking free from this fear?
Well, the first step is acknowledging and validating those feelings.
Okay.
Instead of pushing them away or feeling ashamed,
Right.
it's important to recognize that fear and anxiety are valid emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying to yourself, hey, it makes sense that I'm feeling this way given my experiences. It's okay to be scared.
That's so important, that self-compassion piece.
Absolutely.
Because often when we're struggling with something, our first instinct is to
Right.
criticize ourselves or try to suppress those difficult emotions.
Yeah.
But that just makes things worse in the long run.
Right. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Uh-huh.
You can only do it for so long before it pops back up with even more force.
Yeah.
So acknowledging those feelings is the first step.
Okay.
And then we can start exploring some healthy coping strategies.
Okay. So what are some practical tools that people can use
Yeah.
to manage those intense feelings of fear and anxiety?
One tool that can be incredibly helpful,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for autistic individuals, is journaling.
Oh, interesting.
Writing down your thoughts and feelings can help you process emotions,
Okay.
identify triggers,
Yeah.
and notice patterns in your responses.
Okay.
It's like creating a roadmap of your emotional landscape.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not just about venting or expressing your feelings.
Yeah.
It's about gaining a deeper understanding of
feedback.
how those feelings operate within you.
Yes,
And that self-awareness can be so empowering
absolutely.
because it gives you more control over how you respond to those feelings.
Exactly. And speaking of control,
Yeah.
another powerful strategy is developing healthy communication skills.
Yep.
Learning to express your feelings and needs clearly and directly can go a long way in building trust
Right.
and reducing misunderstandings in relationships.
This makes me think back to the double empathy problem that came up
Yes.
in one of the articles. It challenges the idea that autistic individuals lack empathy,
Right.
suggesting instead that there's a communication breakdown
Yeah.
between neurotypical and neurodivergent ways of experiencing and expressing empathy.
Yes. And that highlights why communication skills are so crucial.
Right.
It's not about trying to force yourself to communicate like a neurotypical person.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to bridge that communication gap,
Okay.
to help others understand your perspective and for you to better understand theirs.
So it's like learning each other's languages,
Yes,
figuring out how to translate those emotions and needs
exactly.
in a way that makes sense to both parties.
Precisely. And sometimes that might involve
Yeah.
using more concrete language,
Okay.
visual aids,
Mm-hmm.
or even written communication. It's about finding what works for you
Yeah.
and advocating for your communication needs in relationships.
I love that. Advocating for your needs.
Yes.
Because so often people, especially those who are neurodivergent, might feel like they have to suppress their needs or
Yeah.
try to fit into someone else's mold in order to be accepted.
Right.
But advocating for your needs is an act of self-respect
It
and
is.
can actually strengthen relationships in the long run.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about saying, hey, this is what I need to feel safe,
Right.
loved, and respected in this relationship.
Yeah.
And when both partners are willing to communicate their needs openly and honestly,
Mm-hmm.
it creates a foundation of trust and understanding.
That's so powerful. But what about those moments when the
Mhm.
fear of abandonment just hits you like a wave?
Right.
Those times when you're feeling overwhelmed by anxiety and
Yes.
it's hard to think straight.
Yeah.
Are there any tools for managing those intense emotions in the moment?
There are. And this is where mindfulness and self-care practices
Okay.
can be incredibly helpful.
Hmm.
Techniques like deep breathing meditation or progressive muscle relaxation
Right.
can help calm the nervous system and reduce those feelings of panic.
Okay.
It's like having a toolkit. Yeah.
Of strategies you can use to soothe yourself when things feel overwhelming.
I love that analogy. A toolkit.
Right.
It's like saying, hey, I have these resources available to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I can choose whichever tool is most helpful in this moment.
Exactly.
It puts you back in the driver's seat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And self-care isn't just about those in-the-moment strategies.
Right.
It's also about prioritizing your overall well-being,
Okay.
getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, engaging in activities you enjoy.
Yeah.
All of these things contribute to your emotional resilience,
Right.
making you better equipped to handle stress and those difficult emotions.
It's like building up your inner reserves
Exactly.
so that when those waves of fear hit, you have the strength and resources to ride them out.
Exactly. It's not about eliminating the fear entirely.
Right.
That's unrealistic. It's about equipping yourself to manage those feelings more effectively
Yeah.
so they don't control your life.
And this brings us back to something you mentioned earlier, the importance of seeking professional support.
Absolutely.
Because while these coping strategies can be incredibly helpful,
Right.
sometimes we need a little extra guidance and support
Mhm.
to navigate these complex emotions.
Absolutely. A therapist who specializes in autism and anxiety
Yeah.
can provide tailored support and help you develop coping mechanisms
Right.
that are specifically suited to your needs and challenges.
Okay.
They can also help you unpack those past experiences that might be contributing to your fear of abandonment
Right.
and work with you to develop more secure attachment patterns.
And finding the right therapist can be so empowering.
It can.
It's like having a partner on your journey,
Yeah.
someone who understands your unique experiences
Right.
and can help you navigate those difficult emotions
Yeah.
in a safe and supportive space.
It's also important to remember that seeking support is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's a sign of strength and self-awareness.
Okay.
It means you're taking proactive steps.
To improve your well-being and create a more fulfilling life.
You know, as we're talking about seeking support, it makes me think about the power of connecting with the autistic community.
Oh, for sure.
One of the excerpts you sent in talked about how finding community can be so validating and empowering for autistic individuals.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Imagine being surrounded by people who truly get it,
Right.
who share similar experiences,
Mhm.
and can offer support and guidance based on their own lived experiences.
It's like finding your tribe.
Yes,
People who see your neurodiversity not as a deficit,
exactly.
but as a different way of being in the world.
And those connections can be so healing,
Yeah.
especially for someone who's struggled with the fear of abandonment.
Right.
Because when you're surrounded by people who accept and celebrate you for who you are,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes easier to let go of those fears of not being good enough or worthy of love.
It's like that feeling of finally being seen and understood.
Yes.
Of knowing that you belong.
Ex-
And that sense of belonging can be such a powerful antidote to the fear of being left behind.
It really can. Because at its core,
Yeah.
the fear of abandonment is a fear of disconnection,
Right.
of being alone in the world.
Yeah.
But when you find your people, when you build those authentic connections
Right.
based on mutual understanding and acceptance,
Yes.
it starts to chip away at that fear.
It's like building a bridge
Yes,
between your inner world and the outer world, creating those pathways for connection and belonging.
I love that.
And that's a beautiful image to end on.
It is.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Huh?
I'm curious to hear from our listener. What are some of the things you're taking away from our conversation so far? What insights or strategies are resonating with you the most? We'd love for you to reflect on these questions and maybe even jot down some thoughts in your journal.
And as you reflect, think about how these insights can help you not just manage the fear of abandonment, but actually build stronger, more fulfilling relationships in your life. Because that's what we're ultimately aiming for, right? To create those deep, meaningful connections that bring joy and a sense of belonging.
That's a great point. This isn't just about surviving the fear.
Right.
It's about thriving in relationships.
Yes.
And one of the things that keeps coming up in the materials you shared is this importance of self-advocacy,
Yes.
especially for autistic individuals.
Self-advocacy is crucial because it's about recognizing your needs, your strength, and your challenges, and communicating those effectively to others. It's about creating an environment where you can truly be yourself without feeling like you have to mask or pretend to be someone you're not.
It makes me think of that quote by Steve Soberman. Neurodiversity may be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life on Earth. Who can say what form of wiring will prove best at any given moment? It's a reminder that the way autistic individuals experience and interact with the world is valuable and worthy of respect.
Absolutely. And self-advocacy is about honoring that neurodiversity. It's about saying, hey, this is how my brain works, this is what I need to thrive, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
But for someone struggling with the fear of abandonment, speaking up for themselves can feel incredibly daunting, right? It's like that fear of rejection can hold them back from advocating for what they need.
You're right, it's not always easy. But remember, self-advocacy isn't about being demanding or confrontational. It's about clearly and respectfully communicating your needs and boundaries. It's about saying, this is what I need to feel safe and supported in this relationship, and working collaboratively with the other person to find solutions that work for both of you.
One of the excerpts you sent in actually gave some really helpful tips for practicing self-advocacy. It talked about using I statements to express your needs, focusing on specific behaviors rather than making generalizations and offering alternative solutions.
Those are great tips. It's about framing your needs in a way that feels less accusatory and more collaborative. For example, instead of saying, you always cancel plans at the last minute, you could say, I feel hurt and disappointed when our plans change unexpectedly. Could we maybe find a way to communicate more clearly about our schedules?
That's so much more effective. It focuses on your emotional experience and opens up a dialogue for finding a solution together. And sometimes self-advocacy might involve seeking out accommodations or support systems that can help you navigate challenging situations. It might mean asking for clear and concise instructions, taking breaks when you're feeling overwhelmed, or having a trusted friend or family member advocate on your behalf when needed.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that it's okay to ask for help and that doing so doesn't make you weak or incapable. It's actually a sign of strength and self-awareness. And this leads us back to the power of community, which we touched on earlier. Connecting with other autistic individuals, whether online or in person, can be an incredible source of support and validation.
It's like having a group of people who understand your experiences firsthand, who can offer advice and encouragement based on their own journeys. And I imagine those connections can also help build confidence and resilience, which are essential for overcoming any challenge, including the fear of abandonment.
Absolutely. When you surround yourself with people who accept and celebrate you for who you are, it becomes easier to embrace your authentic self and let go of the fear of not being good enough. And that self-acceptance is at the heart of true healing and growth.
That's so powerful. It's about recognizing that your worthiness of love and belonging is not contingent on masking or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about embracing all parts of yourself, including the challenges.
And as we come to the end of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with this thought. The journey of healing and growth is ongoing. There will be moments of triumph and setbacks, moments of clarity and confusion, but the most important thing is to keep moving forward one step at a time with self-compassion and a willingness to learn and evolve.
Beautifully said. And remember, you are not alone on this journey. There are resources available, communities ready to embrace you, and a world waiting to be enriched by your unique perspective and contributions.
So go out there, embrace your authentic self, and create a life that feels safe, fulfilling, and deeply connected. And if you ever need a reminder of your strength and resilience, just come back and revisit this deep dive. We'll be here cheering you on every step of the way.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep shining bright.